Think about needing $1 million to be happy. As long as we haven't reached that amount, we remain unhappy. Considering that only a small fraction of people are millionaires, this would mean that happiness is rare if it depends on having 7 figures in the bank. Now, imagine we deeply crave happiness and feel incomplete until we achieve it. Suppose we've managed to save $100,000, which is a significant amount for most of us. However, based on our self-imposed requirement for happiness, we're still $900,000 short. This creates a feeling of being in debt, which is uncomfortable and burdensome, symbolizing an unfulfilled desire. Our happiness remains elusive until we meet this goal. When our sense of satisfaction relies on things that are hard to obtain, we set ourselves up for constant stress, discontent, and insecurity. We worry about not having enough, losing what we have, and our future not aligning with our desires. A more effective approach is adopting a minimalist mindset. When we reduce our needs, achieving a state of contentment becomes easier. The less we desire, the more abundant our lives feel. This shift means we worry less about gaining or losing, and our stress about missing out diminishes. This video explores the benefits of being content with little, leading to a more carefree life, and how embracing minimalism can transform our perception of abundance. When we feel that happiness is hard to find, we tend to work tirelessly to achieve it. We often set high standards for our happiness, such as having a lot of money, a perfect partner, a high social status, or a mix of these. Imagine constantly working to meet these goals while feeling unhappy because our needs aren't yet fulfilled. Then, when we finally reach our goal, we hold on tightly, fearing that losing it would mean losing our happiness. This makes life stressful and demanding. The more specific and rigid our conditions for happiness, the harder it becomes to feel satisfied. When our happiness depends on external factors, even small changes can shake our sense of well-being. For example, someone who wants a perfect life with a perfect house, family, job, and social circle will find it hard to stay happy if even one aspect isn't perfect. Their happiness is fragile, like a house of cards. As the backwards law suggests, the more we need to feel satisfied, the less satisfied we become. The more we want, the less we feel we have. Therefore, the fewer needs we have, the more we experience abundance. Abundance means feeling like we have more than enough. But what counts as enough varies from person to person and changes over time. For example, a college student might feel content with enough money for food and parties, but later in life, a high salary might not feel like enough. The good news is that we can change our perception of what's enough. The less we need to feel satisfied, the easier it is to achieve contentment. We become less affected by changes in the outside world, much like the oceans have remained abundant despite the Earth's many changes over billions of years. Imagine someone who feels fulfilled with the basics: clothing, food, shelter, and a few friends to talk to. This person's contentment depends on things that are always available, making it hard to disrupt their happiness. So, the fewer our needs, the stronger our sense of well-being. While we can't eliminate all desires, since having needs is part of being human, we can manage our desires to focus more on abundance than scarcity. As Epicurus once said, "If you want to make a man happy, add not unto his riches, but take away from his desires." Here are a few ways to manage our desires and shift from a mindset of scarcity to one of abundance. 1. The power of moderation. In a previous video, we discussed how the philosophy of Epicurus can enhance minimalist living. Epicurus categorized desires into 3 types: natural and necessary desires, like food, shelter, and rest; natural but unnecessary desires, like gourmet meals and designer clothes; and vain desires, like power, extreme wealth, and fame. He advised focusing on the first category because they are essential and easy to fulfill, while avoiding the last category because they are unnecessary and insatiable. However, in our modern world, there is a vast grey area of desires that aren't essential for happiness, but are abundant and easily accessible. For instance, listening to music, playing video games, or browsing YouTube are not necessary for our survival, yet they are readily available. Given the sheer volume of music, games, and videos today, these pleasures can be considered abundant. The problem arises when we overindulge in these activities. Overindulgence can lead to dissatisfaction because as we consume more, our senses become less sensitive and demand more stimulation to feel satisfied. This creates a cycle where we need more and more, reducing our sense of abundance. To break this cycle, we need to choose our desires wisely and avoid letting them control us. The Stoics introduced the virtue of moderation to help manage our desires. Moderation involves practicing modesty and self-control. By mastering these virtues, we can enjoy abundant pleasures without becoming dependent on them. This way, these pleasures remain plentiful and enjoyable, serving us only when we choose. 2. Feeling gratitude for what we have. Humans often fixate on what they want instead of appreciating what they already possess. This mindset leads to a cycle of unfulfilled desires and the dissatisfaction that comes with them. Yet, the things we currently have can be a readily available source of joy. After all, what could be easier to enjoy than what is already in our possession? By not valuing what we have, we fall into dissatisfaction and constantly seek something else to make us happy. However, if we shift our focus from what we lack to what we already have, we can find contentment much more easily. Being grateful for our current possessions can significantly increase their value. For instance, many people view their homes as inadequate, too small, too old, or unattractive. But if they change their perspective, they can appreciate having a roof over their heads, living in a cozy space, and recognizing that old doesn't necessarily mean unlivable. Larger, newer, and more beautiful homes might exist, but the homes they have still meet their basic need for shelter. Compared to those with worse living conditions or no home at all, any home is a blessing and something to be grateful for. By shifting our mindset from dissatisfaction to gratitude, we enhance the value of what we already have. Gratitude not only provides a free path to satisfaction, but also helps us save money. If we continually chase after bigger and better things, we might eventually achieve the same level of satisfaction, but at a much higher cost. Instead, appreciating what we have can bring us happiness without the expense. 3. Considering the cost of our desires. Our needs always come with a cost. Generally, things that are abundant tend to be cheap, while scarce items are expensive. It's easier to acquire affordable items than luxurious ones. However, the difficulty also depends on our individual circumstances. For instance, a wealthy person might easily afford an expensive watch, while a poorer person might need years to save for the same item. Although the price of the watch doesn't change, it's relatively cheaper for the rich than for the poor. When choosing what we need, it's wise to consider the true cost. The American philosopher Henri David Thoreau had a simple rule: the price of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it. Whenever we desire something, we should ask ourselves, how much of my life am I trading for this? How many hours of work will this purchase require? And how will this work impact my health? Items that demand a small amount of our life can be seen as cheap, while those requiring a significant portion of our life are expensive. By focusing on needs that are easy and affordable to meet, we can experience a sense of abundance. This abundance can come from either having plenty of resources or needing only a small part of our life to fulfill our desires. For example, taking on a large mortgage might not be the best idea if it means constant stress to keep up with payments. Even if we buy our dream house, the cost in terms of life and well-being might outweigh the benefits. 4. Avoiding long-term debt. Being in debt is a stressful experience because it ties us down with the obligation to repay what we owe. While we usually think of debt in terms of money, our desires also create a kind of debt to one of the most relentless creditors, our mind. How does the mind act like a creditor? Each time a desire arises within us, we immediately find ourselves in debt. We move from a state of contentment, where we owe nothing because we have no unmet desires, into a state of indebtedness. The mind insists that we fulfill this desire, and if we don't, it nags us constantly, much like a debt collector. This cycle is somewhat unavoidable. When we're hungry, we need to eat. When we're tired, we need to sleep. These natural desires are easy to satisfy because food and rest are generally accessible. The real challenge comes with long-term desires that are harder to fulfill. These desires create a lingering sense of debt, making us feel incomplete until they are satisfied. For instance, consider someone dealing with unrequited love. If you have romantic feelings for someone who doesn't feel the same way, and you can't let go of the hope that they will someday return your affection, you set yourself up for prolonged dissatisfaction. Your mind makes the reciprocation of this person's love a prerequisite for your happiness, a debt that may never be repaid. Living in hope for something unlikely to happen isn't a good strategy for happiness. This kind of long-term debt keeps us in a constant state of wanting, preventing us from feeling content with what we have. Think about this. Instead of tying our happiness to achieving distant dreams and desires that might take years to fulfill or may never be fulfilled, we should focus on finding joy in what is readily available. Enjoying the present doesn't mean we shouldn't have long-term goals, but it means appreciating the small things and not basing our entire happiness on achieving grand ambitions. We can find satisfaction in simple, abundant things. Often, this means shifting our mindset from trying to conquer the world to managing our desires for it. Essentially, there are two ways to create a sense of abundance. The first is by accumulating more of what we desire, but this makes us dependent on external factors beyond our control. The second is by curbing our desires, making what we already have more satisfying. The less we crave from the world, the more abundant it appears. In essence, the less you want, the more you have. We've reached the end of our discussion, and I hope these insights have been helpful to you. Remember, you're an important part of this channel and community. If this video has helped you reflect, learn something new, or simply resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up so more people can benefit from Stoic wisdom. And if you haven't yet, check out our ebook on Stoicism and how to apply it in your life. Subscribe for a daily dose of Stoic wisdom and a more fulfilling life.